So I thought it would be a really good time to kind of start fresh. We were starting fresh with this event, with a reboot and more or less a rebrand. And I wanted to just talk about Balboa and kind of where it came from, the original originators, and then how Sylvia and Jonathan came into it, and then, segue into Jacob and his feelings and experience with Balboa. I fell in love with it. I saw it in 1998, and it was great. So I've been hooked ever since.
Where did you learn it? Or where was your first introduction to it?
At Catalina.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Camp Catalina. It was a big, huge camp they used to have in the 90s. And
that was the Stevens sisters?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, why don't we start with Sylvia?
Nobody actually knows where Balboa started exactly, but our legend, instead of the Savoy Ballroom, is the Rendezvous Ballroom in Balboa, which is part of Newport Beach. It's Balboa Island, but it's really a peninsula, but we call it Balboa Island.
Right.
And it probably was happening in the 20s sometimes, but by the 30s, it was a really solid dance. There was... it was very particular. It wasn't homogenized because we didn't have YouTube. People didn't travel all that much. So you had the inland people. It was a Southern California dance for the most part originally. I'm sure versions of this popped up somewhere else too. I doubt that this basic is something that only we invented. But if you were from the inland part of California, you danced more flat-footed. And if you were from the coast, you danced more on the ball of your feet. I learned from most of the ball of your feet people, but there's a lot of flat-footed guys, and which is not a pejorative. It just was a different look. And because they didn't really commingle that much, there was two kind of distinct styles. And then within each style, every high school had a slightly different style. You could watch someone dance and go, oh, you're from Taft. Oh, I see, you go to Central or whatever. So it was because there wasn't the big mix that we have now. And then I started to do, it's kind of like spring break. It used to happen over Easter break. People would go to the Rendezvous and just pile in. People were sleeping on the beach or blah, blah, blah. Well, a lot of drinking, a lot of sleeping on the beach, dancing. So it's just an excuse to dance and drink and party and hanging out. So that's when the styles started to mix. Like they kind of saw different things. So people got different ideas about. I think the dance got a little more interesting when the style started to mix, because each style has things that it offers and also keeps you from doing. And so when you can learn another style, you say, oh, I could do this, and this would allow me to do this other thing that I can't do in my regular style. So that started to happen. The heyday of this whole thing was probably in the late 20s, early 30s. Mostly it was just pure ballet. It wasn't swing. It wasn't the out and in and toss outs and stuff. That was kind of what the kids in Southern California did to swing music. Lindy Hop hadn't come over, so it wasn't triple, but it was what we do with bal swing. The reason why we call it bal swing, it's the swing part. So you had the swing dancers and you had the bal dancers, and the twain did not meet. They were like, no, no, no. It's like, if you bal, you do not swing, and if you swing, you're a horrible person, you do not bal. And then the Lindy Hops, I'm not sure why this happened, but the second generation of Balboa dancers were like, well, but that kind of looks cool, and this kind of looks cool. And so I think that was it was partially because something else was cool and looked good, why can't we kind of mix it? And the other theory is that when Lindy Hop started to progress and come out to California, then they felt an invading army of the other. And they're like, well, we have to band together to keep that other stuff out. So why they mixed, we don't know. But in the mid-30s is when we started seeing people dance what we think of as Balboa or bal swing. So it wasn't just pure, it was the whole mix-up thing. Some people did mostly swing with a little bal. Some people did mostly bal with a little swing. But as it came down from the people who were learning in the middle 30s, like Willie and Maxie and Dean and all those folks, and Mills, as it came down, they were mostly mixed. It was kind of a 50-50 kind of deal. And those are the people I learned from. I never met an original bal dancer. I just met those guys. And so they were I would ask them questions about back in the day, or how did you learn? And they go, I learned from my sister. Well, where did she learn? I don't know. So that was as far back as I could get in some histories with these people. I wasn't really able to. And plus, I was just wanting to learn it. I wasn't paying enough attention to document anything. I was just like, give me the information. So I first saw Balboa that I can remember in the 1960s at the Palladium Ballroom. Jonathan, my original dance partner, and I would, my mom, because neither of us were old enough to drive, my mom would take us to the Palladium anytime there was a big band there, because we really liked to do swing dancing. We didn't know anything about it, but we just wanted to go and watch and try to suck it in. Before that, we were watching old movies on television, and then if you watch Hell's a Poppin' and then you watch it one more time a year later, it's a lot harder to get to versus rewinding and stuff like that, because there was no recording. It was just when it showed up on TV, you watched it at 3 a.m. and did the best you could to figure out what's going on, which was, in my case, not anything particularly correct. So we would go to the Hollywood Palladium just to do the swing dancing stuff, and we saw people doing bell swing, and I thought, what is that? It's like a funny dance, but it's kind of cool. So I didn't know what it was called. I'd recognized it, and I thought it was something I wanted to learn, but I was still more interested in trying to learn how to do Lindy at that point. But the dumb thing that I did was I would see someone doing either footwork, whether it was Lindy or Bal or whatever, and I would think, that is cool. So I'm a weird stalker, so I would follow that person into the bathroom, females, follow her into the bathroom, and kind of say, hi, I just watched you dancing, it was really cool, and I saw you do this little thing like this, and can I give you $20 and you could show me how to do that? And they're like, what? I'm just dancing. Like, no. And they were just, I was so inappropriate, but I didn't realize I was just hungry for anything at that point. So, it was slow going. I didn't learn. I mean, I was interested, but I got no information of it until the 80s when I started taking lessons from Dean Collins. Jonathan and I did. So Dean Collins had a studio in his basement. The studio floor was put in by Willie Desitoff, who was a master carpenter. Willie Desitoff being a great bal swing dancer. And so as we were taking lessons there, we would drive down. It took us 2 hours to get there, 2 hours to get home. Every week it was either Tuesdays or Thursdays. We'd go down for 1, 2, 3, however long the lesson lasted. Sometimes it was short. Sometimes he would blah, 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 blah. We'd just keep sucking it up. We recorded all of our lessons with Maxie, Willie, and Dean, and other people for our own particular use. So because by the time we drove home, we'd forgotten most of what we'd learned. I had a house fire from a wildfire in Santa Barbara in 2009, and I lost almost everything. I lost everything I owned, but most of the videotapes went. But there were some that were, thanks to Jonathan, some that he had taken out and shoved in other cases, so they were downstairs in the communal place. So we do have a few of those left. I have edited them out of any talking because these were not for the general public. They were just for our use. And so there was no editing verbally for what they said or who they said it about And so I have to edit all that out because they would not have there wasn't anything that they would want to have made public, So those things are online. They're really poor quality. It's a black and white camera. It's the way it goes because back in those days the Luxes were not so good, so black and white camera actually you use less light than you did on the color camera, and so it's grainy and horrible. So it's online with Dean Collins and Maxie Dorf and some of the Willie stuff. Please just look at the person. We were horrible. We're still not good enough, but I wanted to say, look. Don't look at me, look at the thing. I'm not, a lot of people go, well, I can't show that because I look like poop. I go, well, yeah, I look like blue, but, look at this master. So those are being shared. So we just really loved Balboa. I just liked it. And we used to go to, in Santa Barbara in the 80s, in like 82, 83, 84, we had about 40 or 50 people doing bal and bal swing. And we would rent a bus. We'd charter a bus and go down to the Balboa Pavilion at Bal Night once a month when they had that. And we would I told my students, look, you think you're cool and you're not at all. So you're just going to stand against the wall and look at stuff. If someone asks you to dance, you can say yes, but don't ask them to dance and don't show them how cool you are because you're just going to annoy them, And I don't want to be a scourge. So So at first people were like, well, they stood against the wall, but then they were like, the next time we went down there, everyone wanted to be on that bus. It was like everyone was just so fascinated by this. There'd be 300-400 people doing Bell Swing. And then it got less and less. It started the people dying off or whatever, and so it became once every other month and then 3 times a year. And I saw Balboa was kind of dying off for the most part. I was like, this is too cool of a dance. We just got to try to save it. So Jonathan and I set out to do the best we could to spread it. And so as we're teaching any kind of workshop weekends, we would always have a Balboa taster. And for 15 years, I did the basic. We could do the 2, hold on 3, hold on 4 basic. And that's all we would get to. And and at the same time, any routine that we did, we always had a Balboa interlude in every single routine, just so that it would stay on the radar of the community. We weren't good at it, but it was better than nothing, so we did it. And the bad news about that was then people thought Balboa was a rest step for Lindy Hop. It's like you get tired, you do a little Balboa. But it was just the fact that we couldn't do a whole bell dance. We needed to just put something out there. So part of the thing that I learned from that is you have unintended consequences when you teach something or do something. So we're just doing that, and we used to do a weekend workshop for Valerie Stahlstrom and Joel Plies in Cincinnati or Cleveland. And we would do, we have a lot of, Jonathan and I knew a lot of extraneous weirdo dances. So we would do, a little of this, a little of that, and we would do Balboa. We'd have our little Balboa taster. And I said, next year, wouldn't it be cool if we'd like maybe we could do a whole day of Balboa so we could get beyond the basic. And they were thinking, yeah, that's pretty good. All of them drank, I didn't. And so after a few more drinks, I said, maybe we could do just a whole weekend of Balboa. That might work. So we convinced each other that we would do a whole thing. It would be the all Balboa weekend. And if nobody came, we wouldn't charge them for anything. So we just took a chance, and we had 80 people, and it was a success. And so that's how the All Bal weekend started. It was the first All Balboa weekend anywhere, and it also started to be a critical mass of more than just people in Santa Barbara wanting to learn this dance. This was early on, and then in Southern California for me, I got good enough that I could dance with all the old timers, that they liked me, and I wasn't a burden. At first, I was a real burden. I have to give props to all the leaders who endured me for all those years, because I was the only person I was the only young person interested. They're like, it's her or nothing, so suck it up, buddy. And so everybody was really nice. They would dance one dance with me, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. She's yours now. And then I knew I finally got decent enough when they started saying, hey, you want another one? I was like, oh, and then Maxie wanted to do demos with me and stuff like that. I'm going, okay, I made it. But it was slow going. And in Southern California, the revival after it was like the late 90s when the Lindy Hop revival, Gap commercial, blah, 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 blah. Everyone was very enthusiastic. And since this was a Southern California dance, a lot of the kids, him and people even younger than or older than you,
earlier than me.
Yes, were doing Bal, and it was completely. They said Balboa on it, but the only thing that had in common was there was 2 people dancing. Zero to do with ballad. It was just. It was
similar.
Yeah, it was 8 counts, and there were slows and quicks, and a lot of aerials. And I said, we don't do a lot of aerials in ballet. I go, yeah. We do aerials. I go, okay. Show me a video of Maxie doing an aerial. Nope. Anyway, so it was just jitterbug dancing, but it was exuberant, and they loved it, and they thought they were doing Balboa. And I was like, well, you keep on it. Keep working at it. Because it wasn't smooth. It was bouncy. It was hard. It was rough. It was horrible. And it wasn't that melding with your partner and floating on a cloud feeling that made me love the dance so much. It's more about, for me, the people that handed it to me said, it's not about anybody but you, your partner, and the music. It's the opposite of Lindy Hop. It's not something for an audience. It's a very intimate thing between these 2 people, which is a hard sell. It's hard to say, hey, you're going to work really hard for a bunch of years and nobody's going to know about it other than this one person you're dancing with. So consequently, we've had a lot of, workshop weekends and contests and stuff like that, which is kind of antithetical to what Balboa really should have been and was back in the old days. There wasn't a lot of bal contests because it's not a contest dance. But without that, we wouldn't have been able to keep the dance alive. If you had been able to go to a ballroom and see people dancing, you would have learned it and come to it in an organic kind of way, but that wasn't possible. So we had to have this kind of odd way of passing the dance on, which isn't really great. There's a lot of danger to it, but it's the best we had. So we've done that, and then people started to actually get a little bit better. I was very excited. I was like, oh, this one doesn't hurt. And then, oh, I'm not bouncing a whole lot. And then, hey, this is actually fun. So slowly the leaders got the idea, and to be honest, the followers were a little bit quicker on the uptake because they got to dance with the old timers that were left, and the leaders could get. I mean, if you danced with Ann Mills, she could back lead you into anything. But aside from that, most of the other followers were just like doing their thing, and you either paid attention or not. So that's kind of a very, very short, condensed version of the history of it for me and where it came from and how I came to it. I just really wanted to take what these people, the followers and the leaders, are giving to me and pass it on exactly like they wanted me to pass it on. I don't do it that way all the time, but I can pass on what they told me. I've created my own way of dealing with things, but I think it's important for the posterity of me not just taking it, changing it, and passing it on, but passing on the original and passing on the change so that we can kind of keep the root. We would like it to be so that if Willie and Maxie and Hal and Nancy and all those people came back and said, oh, that's just great, and they'd notice it and recognize it as bal and bal swing, not like, oh, that's a cool dance, what do you call this? Yeah. Which was starting to happen. And the whole scene goes through little changes. You go along, and then somebody gets an idea, and it kind of explores, and people get excited about it, and then it kind of goes off the rails, but then you go, oh, it's off the rails, then you can kind of bring it back, and then you have an additional tool to make the dance good, but it's still part of the same thing. Or you can keep going off the rails, and it just keeps going off the rails. Neither of those, one's not a pejorative, it just becomes a different dance. I'm not knocking anything here, but if you look at West Coast swing contemporarily, how is that related to Lindy Hop? Not at all. It's completely.
It's like you can tell there's certain things that are kind of the same
every once in a while, but when it's just to me, it just looks like lyrical. It looks like lyrical theater arts to me. So I'm like, and the music doesn't swing, so you can't. Anyway, It's a completely different dance. It's skilled, it's fabulous, it's a really good thing. It's just not part of the swing community anymore. It broke off from the parent plant. I mean, Carolina Shag, East Coast Swing, Bop, Beach Bop, all these things, and Lindy Hop, you can kind of see the relation of the family. So as we explore new things in bal and bal swing, I think it's okay. You go a little bit off the rail, and then you kind of come back. I don't think anybody here is old enough to remember the groove period in Lindy Hop, but it's...
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I danced at. I'm
groove period in Lindy Hop, I was a little worried. I thought, oh, man, this just looks like bad West Coast swing. And, okay. And everyone's dancing to Kiss and blah, 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 blah. And that's okay. But I thought, well, it was useful to the community because before that was just fast. So we needed to dance slow and give followers options to do more things so we could bring our voice up. So I think there was a lot of goodness in having explored that, but we came back. We didn't go off. So as we're doing stuff in Balboa, that's what I'm hoping that the community can do, is that you have to expand things, try things, then kind of go, oh, I see, it's a little bit too much. Take the skill and bring it back so that it's still Balboa. That's. I'm going to be around for maybe 5 to 30 years, and after that, you can do whatever the hell you want with it. But while I'm still here, I'm going to bitch at you guys. So I didn't spend my life trying to keep this dance going to have it change into West Coast swing. But anyway.
That was great.
I respect West Coast swing. I mean, I used to do West Coast swing. I've actually have won West Coast swing contest.
Yeah. So I remember, Silvio, you had mentioned to me several times over the years when the old timers were young enough to still come out to some of the things we would do, then they would see certain things, and then they would talk with you about it
Oh yeah.
afterwards.
Like Maxie, I mean, you know, the Maxie, the very first basic Maxie showed me was this, you know, the little foot release, this one. And so that's what I taught my students, because that's what I knew. And then my students took it and made it kicks. And so Maxie saw this, he goes, you got to stop teaching them to kick. You don't kick in Balboa. I said, I'm not teaching them to kick. And he says, quote, "You're the only one effing teaching it. It's your fault." I said, "But I'm not teaching them to kick." He goes, "It's still your fault." And I got to the point where I was like, yeah, you're right. So you teach something for you guys who are teaching. You teach it the best you can, and then you see 6 months later how it's interpreted.
Yeah.
And if it's good, leave it. If it's not good, you got to bring it back and try to re-educate it and do it another way. So I took that foot release basic, that knee release basic out of there. I do that in a later class so that people don't go 1, 2, hey, 1, 2, hey, you know. So that's kind of a thing, is like, you've got to look at what you teach, and you may be teaching it completely correctly and it's brilliant and it's perfect, but you're also, unfortunately, responsible for how people deal with it. And you need to kind of try to gently keep them on the path of righteousness.
That is actually a really good point. And the other reason why I wanted us to have this conversation is because I was starting to feel like it, with social dancing in general, but it's in particular, like with Balboa, like the original intention of when everyone was out dancing, when they were in the ballrooms, it was a social thing. And sometimes it started to feel, at least for me, like it was getting competitive. And then there wasn't the enjoyment of dancing with that person, because if you weren't at a certain thing or a certain level, you know, it was starting to leave people out instead of being this inclusive.
Yeah, because you should
feeling.
be able to enjoy yourself just doing the basic. You don't have to do a simple basic. So one person's just basic, simple basics, all they can do. The other person can stay with that and enjoy them and still have fun adding and subtracting and blah, 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 without dissing their partner.
Yeah, because our events, as Sylvia said, it's not that they're contrived, but we come together to do this specific thing, as opposed to when the social dance was part of the fabric of the current culture,
Right.
when you could go places and you could see it. And we had a little bit of that slice in the late 90s with that swing revival, because everywhere you would go, there would be swing in the different clubs. And it was still like a subculture, but it was current at the time, and that's like the closest slice to having social partner dancing as a culture, except for the disco era, which I danced in for a while, which is another
Hey,
topic.
I can teach hustle.
Yeah, I love hustle.
I look like, but I have a fun time.
The other thing I want to just mention quickly before we let
No, he has
Jacob
to
start
stop.
to say some
Not
things.
let him. He's going to have to.
Yes, he does have to. Is that so? Sylvia and Jonathan, my understanding, I was not there, but it was relayed to me. They were at the original, I guess I call it the original meeting in New York at Small's Paradise.
No, it was at the Cat Club.
It was at the Cat Club.
It was,
okay.
Yeah, it was a Lindy Hop thing. It's in Frankie Manning's book on page 2 something or other.
Okay.
It was a meeting where it was Aaron Stevens and Stephen Mitchell, Jonathan and I, and the Jivin London Lindy Hoppers.
Yeah, Ryan told me about it.
With Ryan Francois, who had a fro and couldn't swing outward. It was horrible. So it was amazing, because I was like, wow, that's sad. And then Ryan got together with Stephen and Frankie, and I saw him about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later, and all of a sudden he wasn't just good, he was like really good. I thought, oh, is that the same guy? It was like, it really shocked me. But anyway, I've been around a lot. I mean, for a long time. So yeah.
She was there when it started. Well, when we started. She's part of that reason we're here.
Well, I mean,
so.
I started with Dean Collins in 1980, and I danced, for 15 years before that, just really poorly by watching old TV shows, and as you can see on YouTube, American Bandstand. That one was, we had done this thing, and the way they used to do it before that was you brought a little piece of music, and you basically had 30 seconds of your little music, and you did your little thing. And then people voted by postcards.
Oh, that's right.
Postcards. And so each, the local entity that sent you would have, try to make it so that you'll win next year. They bring out postcards and, they support you and blah, blah, blah. We were just there to dance. And we've worked out this little sad, little Lindy East Coast swing thing to piece of music. And then we got there and they said, okay, well, we're all dancing to Up Around the Bend by Creedence Clearwater. I went, oh, well, that's not going to work. So we just did a little bad freestyle and a couple 6-count basics and went, well, that's it, we're not going to do anything. But we came in third, and that ended up putting me, all the prizes I got, I sold and was able to put myself through 2 quarters at the University of California. So I was very happy.
Wow, that's
Nice.
great. Cool.
Yeah. Well, in those days, that was,
It wasn't, yeah.
it was possible, with the door prize,
wasn't prohibitively expensive.
Yeah. So Jacob, I don't even know when it is. I know
Yeah.
when you started, sort of.
So,
I remember you. but-
I started in 2003. My sister had been dancing in the mid and late 90s and knew a lot of the cool kids. In
Southern California.
In Southern California. She hadn't traveled much, but she was very much like that smooth Lindy style, kind of Hollywoodish style. And she got back into it around 2003 and had me come out. I got to feel a little bit of a swing out. I was like, this is awesome. So I started dancing. Then I started dancing more, and then I was going out every night of the week. And then
And how old were you?
I was 23.
Okay.
So I wasn't super young, but I was
No, but
pretty
it wasn't.
young.
You were like doing high school stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
Share your early childhood. Tell them about your
Oh,
jam.
God. Yeah.
Oh, that was so cool. You have to hear this, and then keep going.
So I have always liked to move to music. I don't remember this, but my parents have reminded me of this a number of times, where I was toddler some age, maybe 2 or 3, and there was a family that was babysitting me, and their kids took dance lessons, so they took me to watch, and they couldn't keep me out off the floor. So then my parents were paying for the lessons. I did that for a couple years. But after that, I didn't really do much dancing until I got
Was this like
into
tap
swing.
dancing or ballet or?
It was like, I think it was tap and maybe some modern, and I did a little bit of that in like 4th grade as well. But I didn't really get into dancing again until swing. But yeah, I've always liked moving to music. So Balboa, I got into around 2005, fell into it. I had been doing some, because you can't really dance in LA for very long without at least getting exposed to it some. And a person that I like to dance with was like, hey, you want to split up private with Nick? And I was like, sure, why not? And I did the lesson, and he was like, hey, what do you want to learn? I was like, tell me. It's like, okay, let's talk about your basic. And completely reconstructed it. And then maybe 2 lessons later, same thing. Reconstructed again, because you learn the thing and then you start going off the rails, and then if you're getting input frequently enough for how much you're dancing, then you can get the corrections and it fixes everything again. For me, as far as Balboa, I did, like everybody else, definitely attracted to the flashier stuff of it initially.
Of course.
And then the more I was doing it, the more I liked, closed position Balboa. The way I tend to approach it is I like to look at the old timer videos and get inspiration from them, watch the technique behind what they're doing. If maybe something's a little bit off that might hurt myself or my partner, if it was maybe a tiny bit rough, depending on who I'm looking at. Because it's not just Maxie or Willie that I'm generally looking at. I'm looking at some of the other ones, like Ernie Rubin. I saw a video of him randomly that someone had, and he did this really cool thing where he kind of just was walking next to his partner, and he suddenly turned around and then went into what I thought was out and ins. I never saw the video again, but it gave me inspiration to do a walk and then move into an out and in. So in my mind, as long as you're keeping like that innate feel of moving together with your partner, having the shuffles, generally dancing to swing music, sometimes not. Like keeping that as part of it, doing some fancier stuff, experiment, do some weird stuff, bring it back. But that flow and that movement together, especially since I initially learned from a follower, my sister, like the flow and the communicating and being not rough, like trying to keep a a flow the whole time,
Yeah.
right? Occasionally, to my detriment, I very rarely stop myself.
Yeah.
I am almost always moving through something.
Yeah, you do. One thing I really appreciate about Maxie, he would do one move for a whole song.
Right.
It was a really complicated move, but it wasn't like this thing, comma, this thing, comma.
Right.
It was like it just continued. It was one continued thing, and I think that's what you're really good at. Is just you just kind of keep on going, and that's how Bal was. It wasn't like just segmented little things, and unfortunately, all the Bal swing stuff that we see, or Balboa stuff that we see, the Bobby McGee's footage, all of that is not social dancing.
Right.
Because it was this huge camera and these huge Klieg lights, and they turn it on, and you know that as soon as you put the camera on, then you put the Klieg lights on, everyone's going to do flashy stuff. Yeah. And even if you're in the background, you're doing flashy stuff. So it was the show-off stuff that we have. So we don't have a lot of, very little anyway, of social Balboa, Bal swing, but it was beautiful. It wasn't boring. The basic can be just like, it's the basic, or the basic can be so beautiful that you don't need anything else. And that's kind of how Maxie was and Willie, even though they danced differently, the simplest things, you didn't need fancy stuff because they were so good at it. Yeah. And that's what we have to do, is get so good at the basic stuff. Flashy moves are great, and you need to have them to keep the interest and whatnot, but usually if you can only do flashy moves, it's because your basics aren't good enough. Yeah. So if I'm ever judging you in a contest, do some basic-y stuff, and then I'll pay attention to you, because it's just flash, flash, flash. Yeah. I go, okay, they can't do the basics well enough. I'm looking over here.
And especially a really fast song. I have occasionally heard a super fast song, like maybe approaching 300 BPM. I'm like, I'm not working that hard. No. And then I notice someone standing on the side that I know dances really nice, subtle, communicative, pure Balboa. And I'm like, I do want to dance to this song. Yeah. I'm going to go do a bunch of subtle stuff and play around with maybe some rhythms within the basic stuff, and just going to chill out for 3 minutes.
Yeah, but that's the point.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Balboa wasn't just fast. It was fast to slow. Right. I mean, slow Balboa now is a sort of almost a different dance. It wasn't, basically people did slow Balboa, just Balboa slowly. A couple people had their own, they made the version of it, the Lamanu, which is just one guy's version of slow Balboa. But Willie could dance to Moon Glow, and he could dance to Ride Red Ride, and anything in between, slightly different versions of things, but it wasn't a whole separate dance. It was just, when the music came on, you danced, if it was a slow song, you danced slow. If it was a fast song, you danced fast. Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you have anything else to share, or should we open it up for questions?
Just the slow Balboa thing, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. The thing that I really liked about Dean's version of it was it introduced something a little bit different. Yeah. Mainly the axis rotation that you get with your triple steps, and his way of doing essentially a pullback triple going backwards. Yeah. Oh, gosh, just had beautiful. This so melty wave in his body going on. But other than that, when it gets slow, take the movements that you do fast, elongate them out of them, and just move through it. Take your time, enjoy do something that normally takes you 2 seconds and take 10 seconds. Yeah. If you can do that, you know how to move. Right. If you can't, work on it.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Okay, so we can all talk about another 4 or 5 hours, but we want to, any questions or interest, what happened, what to do? Yes.
I just wanted to circle back. I mean, a lot of people here probably haven't met Jonathan.
Right.
Because I know he stopped.
He basically, he retired about 15 years ago.
So I was just hoping you might be able to maybe share some anecdotes.
Lots. Yeah. Well, Jonathan, he was sort of talk about Jonathan a little bit more, because a lot of people, because he has retired 15 years ago, there's not a lot of, he's kind of, a lot of people don't know him who are current because they haven't been here for a long time. Jonathan was a really good dancer for a long time, and he and I both learned to lead and follow. And we always said leader and follow. We didn't say, girl's part or boy's part or man's part or women's part. It's always just lead and follow, because we did both parts. He was exuberant. He also was pretty straightforward. He wasn't going to sugarcoat anything. Just straight ahead. So some people could find him a little bit of abrasive sometimes, but it was just that he was like being honest, and he wasn't trying to hurt people, but he was like, no, instead of like, well, maybe you should work on it a little bit more. He's like, no, honey, you know. I mean, I got to tell you, it's like he's the reason. In some ways, meeting him was the reason that I was able to get into dancing. It was a dance at the Thousand Oaks Rec Center in Thousand Oaks, California, that Casey Kasem used to put on, and I would just a little by myself stuff. My point in dancing was to be able to not have anybody see me. I just wanted to fly under the radar, and I don't remember ever learning swing. I don't remember learning my first swing step, but Jonathan came in. I remember this really well, with this girl named Debbie Held that I didn't know. She was a burgundy dress, and he's trying to get her to do like 6-count swing, and she's not doing it really well. And I said, I can do that. And he goes, you can? I said, yeah. And so we like did our really bad little 6-count swing stuff, and I don't know, 4 or 5 moves. And Casey Kasem said, oh, that's good. You guys want to come on my show? He had a local TV show called Shebang. And so we got to go on Shebang, and I thought that was the pinnacle of my existence, was here we get to be in Shebang. I'm like 15 years old, and I've peaked, you know. But because of that, Jonathan and I needed to continue to learn stuff. So that's when we would watch TV. And he lived about 35, 40 minutes away from me in another town, but we would look through the TV guide and go, okay, at 3 o'clock there's this movie that might have a little bit of swing dancing in it someplace. So we would set the alarm and get up, and he would watch it there, and I would watch it in my house, and sometimes we would even do long distance calls and talk about it. But so it was slow going, but I got to give him a lot of props that he kept on it. Most people would have like said, no, we're not doing that. Jonathan was just as nuts as I was about it. And we just kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. He was a kindergarten teacher. He was a really good kindergarten teacher. I was really amazed going into his classes and watching how he dealt with the students and supported them, but also held them accountable for their actions. And he, in 3 weeks, he could get a class. He goes, okay, class, you got 6 minutes. Here's the clock. When we get there, we have to have the whole room cleaned up, and the room will get cleaned up, and everyone will be ready to go. And they were like engaged. He was really good at engaging an audience and keeping people kind of, yeah, I'll do that, and like signing on to the process or to the project. And I learned a lot about how to teach group classes from him and another person because he was really good with keeping the kindergartners in line. He could do basically the same thing with adults. And I don't know exactly what kind, but I can talk about Jonathan for hours and hours and hours. And there's some things I probably would say, but I don't really want them on record. So, because posterity and So what kind of thing would you? I mean, not something specific, but you were kind of hoping for.
I think he was a colorful personality.
Yes, completely. He was flamboyant. I mean, he could be just regular, but he was gay, and he was not apologetic about that at all. He wasn't quite as flamboyant as maybe people who know Ramiro Gonzalez. Okay, Ramiro is flamboyant too, but they're not annoyingly so. Jonathan was flamboyant in a different kind of way, but he was a big personality. One of the things that, it's a story that Nick Williams tells about Jonathan a lot, was at one of the all Balboa weekends, I can't remember which one, was he and I were Jonathan and I were teaching at. And he had his headset on like this, and I'm in the class, saying, 5, 6, here you go. And then he went out while the music's playing. He goes outside to where the vendors are, and he's looking at racks of clothes, and everyone goes, okay, change partners. And he's just looking at stuff, and he's trying things on. And Nick was standing there going, it was this gape of his mouth. I was like, what? And then he goes, okay, that was pretty good. Try it again. And just, teaching the class from the hallway, and I'm inside going, yeah, because since I'm there, people aren't realizing that Jonathan's not in the room, that he's shopping. So he had his way of enjoying his time no matter what, but he wasn't trying to diss anybody or cheat or anything. It was just that it was like, well, I don't really have to be in there. I can say change partners while I'm finding a fabulous outfit. So yeah. So I don't know. I'm not. You knew Jonathan. So why don't you talk? I mean, there's so much. I met Jonathan when I was 14. So, and he's I have a family compound. My family built a house with some. It's like a family compound. It's one big weird house, and Jonathan lived there with us at the beginning. So he was living in the house starting from 1985 when we started the house, and he was able to die at home. So he's been in my life for just frickin' forever, you know.
I could be mixing up my events, but I do recall taking a Balboa class from him, and it was either 98 or 99. Wouldn't have been Monsters of Swing. Would have been a
It could have
different.
been. I mean, I wasn't there because I didn't do Monsters of Swing, but he could have because he taught there a couple
Yeah,
times.
so it could have been at Monsters of Swing, but I mean, he was funny in the class and, pretty direct and to the point.
Direct, yes.
And then I'd see him at a couple other events. I never really knew him very well, but when we stayed at your place in 2002, Sylvia I think you had to go for a gig or something, and Jonathan took care of us. He, made sure we knew where to go for the dance, to see if we needed anything on the property.
He was a really good host.
Yeah, he was a good host.
Or hostess, I was sorry.
He was funny.
He was very funny.
He'd make jokes and
He was
make
very
jokes
funny
with
and colorful.
Eduardo.
Funny and colorful, yeah. And it was always a good time hanging out with him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody has if I can think of stuff, I just don't want to just say. And then we went and got malts. I don't know what to talk about specifically.
Did you and Jonathan win the U.S. Open one year, or am I dreaming?
You're dreaming.
Thank
we
you.
We
I like
won.
to
but we
dream.
okay, put it this way. The old timer said we won, but somebody else actually took first place.
Okay.
So we got second place, but two different old timers came up to us and said, that's a travesty. They gave us each $100. Mm-hmm. They go, you should have won. They gave me. I said, I can't take this. You deserve it. I went, okay, I'll take this.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah.
Second place is still at
yeah.
a U.S. Open.
I won
still
with-
pretty good.
I won the U.S. Open with Ramiro for this.
Oh, yeah, the street swing.
Street swing, which is strictly just like swing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Romero he's funny. That'd be another topic for another day.
Right.
Any other questions? Does anyone know who Casey Kasem is? I mean, she said that he ran the
Okay,
show.
Casey Kasem was a DJ who had an LA DJ for a while, but he also had a national top 40 show.
Yeah, and he's every Sunday he would
And it was
count him
and it was
down.
it was nationals every Sunday, so he was a big deal. Anyway,
For a long time.
Yeah, for a
Like-
long time.
Into the 2000s, right?
up until he died. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think so. Yeah.
Casey.
Yeah.
Anyone else
He
have
was an
anything?
Armenian vegan.
Armenian vegan.
So you were talking about that initial meeting with Frankie in New York, and I was just wondering, so I don't actually know that story because I haven't read Frankie's book.
No, it's not. It's not in Frankie's book. There's a picture of us in there, but Frankie doesn't perseverate because it's not his story. So.
Just curious how that came about. Were you connected with Aaron?
Yeah. So we knew Aaron and Steven, and they were talking about we're going to go to New York and take some lessons from Pepsi Bethel, which was okay. And there's a whole bunch of people who are coming from London at the same time. So we'll go, So we went. Mm-hmm. And then the bad news for Jonathan and I was we thought Pepsi Bethel's class was going to be like Swing or Lindy, and it wasn't. And I'm in the background being that person, like everyone's going to the left and I'm going to the right. I mean, I was so over my head with this move. I was like, I'm the comic relief here. It was the most embarrassing thing. So it's like, I'm in the corner and they're like changing lines and I just stayed in the corner because I shouldn't have been in the room, but So it was a kind of modern movement. It was stuff that I'm not good at. It never will be. But that whole weekend, so we met at the Cat Club. They had Stephen and Aaron do some demos, and Jonathan and I did our version of the kind of the Dean Collins-y kind of swing, and then we also did Balboa, which they were like, "What the hell is that?" So they were excited about that. And then the Jive and the Lindy Hoppers, which was a performance group, did their fairly long little routine. I think you can see all of this in pieces on YouTube. And then during that weekend, Stephen and Frankie kind of glommed on each other because Frankie was excited to see a person of color there. And so they went off. And then Norma Miller got a hold of Jonathan and I. Norma Miller was flamboyant and Jonathan was flamboyant. So they were like, bang, okay. So she says to us, I live in Crack City and I don't want to be there. Can I just stay at your house for the next 3 days? And we went, sure. So we hung out with Norma Miller for 24/7 for 3 days. And after the first day, I was like, I just love this woman. She is crazy. She's cuckoo. She's ballsy. She's, and doesn't harbor she doesn't take any prisoners for anything. And so we're just hanging out. We're just walking with her, talking, whatever we're doing. She's telling us stories about she used to be a stand-up comedian, open for Red Fox, and just talking all this stuff. It was really fun. And she goes, I'm going to do this little stand-up at the Apollo, and I want you to come. And I thought, not understanding that this is before she told me that she had opened for Red Fox. I just thought, oh, that's nice. And then inside I'm thinking, oh, this poor nice lady, she's going to go to the Apollo and they're going to hook her off and it's going to be so embarrassing. Oh, this poor person, because I'm an idiot. And so we go to the Apollo and she's there and it's like, I'm dying inside because I knew it's going to be really sad. Well, it took her about 10 or 15 seconds to have the whole place eating out of her hand, cheering and screaming for her. And I was like, oh, right, wah, wah, okay. I misjudged that one. And she was just so dynamic. So the best thing that I got out of that weekend for me was hanging out with Norma. I mean, I didn't get stuff from Frankie much, but I got a lot of stuff from Norma, which was really great. And then another day she said, I'm going to a birthday party. Well, that's where we're going. I said, sure. And it ended up being Mama Lou Parks' birthday party. And Mama Lou Parks, who is another old-timer who had a troupe, she kept coming over and go, because we were just like obviously we're the odd kids out there. She kept coming over and giving me cake. So I said, oh, thank you. And I'd eat the cake. She'd go, you don't look like you have a cake. So I ended up eating 4 pieces of Mama Lou Parks' birthday cake.
Did you get meatballs?
Meatballs?
I always hear the story about Mama Lou Parks with the meatballs. Ryan told me that several times.
I was vegetarian by that point, so nope.
Okay.
The meeting with the Swedes and all of that was...
The Swedes... Okay, the Swedes were the Jive and Lindy Hoppers, yeah. So it was Terry Moynihan and a bunch of Russell and anyway, there was a group of them and we saw them and I thought they were good at their routines and stuff, but their dancing it was more execution than dancing. Executing routines versus dancing. So I was less interested in them than I was in people who were dancing. Dancing was more what attracted me than the execution of routines. But the fact that Ryan was exposed to something slightly different and then took that and ran with it faster than any human could possibly run with it and get good. It was really shocking to see the difference. It was like, that's not the same human. It couldn't possibly, nobody could change that much in that show. It was just amazing, And I don't know if you know Ryan Francois, but he's in Lindy Hop and especially in jazz. He's just he's beyond, he can explain things about your hand that, in 20 minutes and you've never thought about it and you see that it changes your whole life. I mean, he's that kind of experience. He's a really great teacher. Yeah. And Stephen's still around somewhere. Yes. And thank you. And again, this sounds like I'm blowing smoke up your tush. I'm not. It's like Balboa lives because you guys gave up your weekend to come here. Balboa isn't about being super fancy. Balboa is a social dance that will only live if you guys continue to do it. It's the fancy, and it's not going to live because I'm doing it. It's going to live because you guys are doing it. And so as somebody who's been working really hard to try to preserve it, I actually really appreciate that you gave up your weekend to help to learn more and to help preserve the dance. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Golf claps.
All right.